But I'm going to start just by introducing this webinar. I'm going to start with a quote. Each of us must confront our own fears, must come face to face with them. How we handle our fears will determine where we go with the rest of our lives. To experience adventure or to be limited by the fear of it. And who said that but Judy Blume, who I think Debbie knows. So I also want to start by all of us collectively taking 3 breaths so we can kind of pull it down, be in the moment, which really helps when addressing fear, anxiety, etc. So just 3 deep breaths. I'll start the first one. You can do the rest on your own. So I like to breathe in with my nose and then out with my mouth. To those of you joining, we're just taking 3 deep breaths to get started. Thank you so much for doing that. So over the past year, since COVID started, I've spoken to many, many women. That's what I do when someone is interested in joining a trip. And I love that because I get to know them, and we do really intimate women-only trips all over the world. So I've heard, and this is kind of why I had this idea to do this webinar and have these beautiful, amazing ladies join me, because I've heard so much fear in people's voices. I've heard frustration, I've worry, anxiety, and why in the world wouldn't we be? We've suffered a collective, like worldwide trauma. And I myself lost 80% of my business. My dad died, he was 98, but he died from COVID in December. But other people have much worse stories. So there's no lack of upset, tumult, and heartbreak to go around. I'm a pretty strong person. I've done a lot of work with some people that are on the call, and a lot of work on myself, and I'm a serial optimist, but even I had a moment where I was really early on in the pandemic, totally devastated and fearful. I could feel that acrid fear that rises up, and you can feel it in your body. And believe it or not, it was the Mushroom movie. If anyone hasn't seen it, the documentary, fantastic fungi that got me out of the funk. So you never know where something is going to help you, really. I also heard Michelle Obama recently speak on the Stephen Colbert show the other day, and she talked about how she got really depressed this year. So the point is that experiencing anxiety, fear, or downright depression is not weird. It's not unusual. It's common. After all, this is one of the toughest years any of us collectively have ever faced. Here's the good news. We have all made it out alive. And, you know, that's saying something this year. And that's not, maybe that's the good news, because we've started to, I feel like I've started to learn more gratitude. But we do still need, I think, to find a way to heal. So I'm still hearing, as I speak to women, and I spoke to a couple of people today, a lot of fear and uncertainty and confusion, understandable, which is still out there as we try to navigate this post-COVID or almost post-COVID world. And obviously we're not quite post. So what is pre-post? I don't know what you want to call it. So people will come with us on trips, they book the trips, and then maybe a family or a friend will say, what are you doing? Why are you going there? That's risky. Are you sure? Are you going to put your kid or your mom or whoever in danger? So there's a lot of other people that kind of accentuate that fear in our lives. So there's other people that are worried about getting the vaccine, and yet they still want to go. And other people are worried that they'll bring something back home. The point is there's a lot of worry. Today's conversation that we're going to have is not about the vaccine. There's plenty of forums for that. This is not one of them. This discussion is just about fear itself. So that's a conversation we can have at any time, but I feel like we're kind of at this heightened state of fear and anxiety right now. Even before the pandemic, I heard a lot of fear in women's voices, not as much, to a lesser degree, but it was still there. And interestingly, when we get to all your questions that I'm going to kind of rattle off, a lot of them were around just sort of practical fears that have nothing to do with this past year. So around group travel, which is what I do, and a lot of people who advertise on both JourneyWoman and Solo Traveler World, as well as Kelly does some really cool trips. There people have still, even with the group sort of guided group travel, people have a lot of fears around that, getting lost, not knowing the language, food issues, group issues. Will they like me? Will I like them? Are they too catty? Am I going to feel like I'm at that lunch table again? You know, like in third grade, nobody wanted to sit with me. Like these are just like all little, you know, person that's still inside us from when we were a kid. And we still have those worries, no matter, you know, how many places we've gone and people we've met. They do get easier the more you get out there. Those of us who might have previously been super bold, fearless, and, you know, I'm thinking of Kelly and a lot of our speakers on this call who felt empowered. They're on an empowered path. You know, some of us who feel like that kind of person have been shaken to the core because of this last year. So how do we recover? So today we're going to talk about fear. How do we face it? Debbie and Mary Beth, who I'm going to introduce in just a second, will head up that discussion. We're going to give you some concrete steps to mitigate fear when it rises up in our body and in our mind, how we can move beyond it, yet still listen to it when it's necessary, because you can't become fearless, and that's impossible. It's a necessary emotion. But how do you determine the difference between something that you can listen to and something that's really not helping you? So we're going to talk about that as well. And then I'm going to hand over the floor to the three stellar women who represent the largest, most important women's travel groups in not only our country, but also in Canada. So I'd say North American rock stars, namely JourneyWoman, Damesly, and Solo Traveler World. So once we learn to tame our fears, not erase them, but tame them, what is the opposite of fear? What comes next after conquering a fear? Peace, hope, a smile. You don't have to be Superwoman. You don't have to jump out of a plane to prove you have less fear, nor is it possible to remain fearless at all times. Without as much fear, worry, anxiety, you will feel more tranquil. You'll be able to sleep better. You'll have closer relationships. You'll have more happiness in your life. And that's what we all want. So this is way beyond travel. Fear is something that stops us all the time. I want to read you a quote from my guru or teacher, or whatever you want to call it. The person that I learned how to meditate. It's a place called Plum Village. And it's headed up by a very famous Vietnamese monk who's now very old and no longer, you know, really teaching, but his disciples are. His name is Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm sure a lot of you know who he is. But he said this: fear keeps us focused in the past or worried about the future. If we can acknowledge our fear, we can realize that right now we are okay. Right now, today, we are still alive and our bodies are working pretty much, that's my word, marvelously. Our eyes can see the beautiful sky. Our ears can hear the voices of our loved ones. He always gets to me, and it's all about getting back to that heart. So I'm going to introduce, speaking of heart, one of my favorite people in the world. Debbie Phillips is one of the first life coaches that existed in North America. She has worked with probably the most important women in the United States, from world leaders, people who've run for, you know, office, people in office or in the White House now, big, you know, huge talents, whether they're on television, music, and normal people like you and me. And I'm blessed to have her in my life for, 15 or 20 years. She's the reason why I started my business. She gave me the courage to do that. And she and I are actually doing a trip together in July. She and I did our first trip together. I can't say enough about this person, and you'll understand as soon as you hear from her. Debbie Phillips also created an organization called Women on Fire. So that's talking about women in their passions and, really supporting each other. And I find women are incredibly supportive of one another. I don't buy into anything else. So I will share with you everybody's information in terms of their websites, their social media and stuff when I send a follow-up email after this call, as well as the recording. But welcome to Debbie Phillips, and you're coming to us live from Florida?
From Naples, Florida. Hi,
Yes.
everyone. Doni, thank you so much. It is just so exciting to be with all of it. There's just pages and pages of you here, and I can't wait. At some point during this, I want to scroll through all the pages and see all the shining faces who are here. So thank you so much. And obviously, I'm here because I so deeply respect Doni, and I love this idea. She is someone who is constantly bringing together women. She did that before she even had this business. And while she was really kind and generous to talk about my role in her business, the fact is she took an idea that she had in her head, she got the support for it, and she burst through any kind of fear in starting a business that is an international business. So she truly is the one who, is to be speaking about fear tonight. So because we do want to get to your questions and that we have such an esteemed panel here who can answer them, I'm going to just talk to you about a couple of strategies, and I want to share a travel story with you, but also because my work is around helping women in particular burst through fear, because we all know there's really two basic emotions, love and fear. And it's either one or the other most of the time. And so if you're anything like me in this post-COVID time, and as travel begins to tug at your heart, you probably are worrying and wondering, is it safe? Will I be safe? In my own particular instance, I had the most wonderful husband who died 2 years ago. And while I'm a very independent woman, it felt odd to get back out there traveling. So that can be a fear for women. If perhaps you're divorced or you've lost a spouse, going back out and traveling, that's a whole new ball game. So, and all those things that Doni talked about that are fears, where we start asking, what if? And so if you find yourself in that place right now, here are a couple of strategies that I use in my own work just to burst through that fear. And one is to consider that whatever fear you have could be, and this is an acronym that I love and really changed my life when I learned this 25 years ago. Your fear could it be false evidence appearing as real. False evidence appearing as real. Because you know what? That is what most fears are. And as Doni so eloquently quoted Thich Nhat Hanh, your fears and the things you worry about and your concerns are usually things about the future. And so just being able to stop, and I do this in my own life, I just say to myself, could this be false evidence appearing as real? And one of the other strategies, along with that one that I use, is I check off when I feel like I'm afraid to do something that I really want to do. And that, by the way, is a way to tell yourself whether it is a fear. If there's something you really want to do, but you have a lot of resistance to it, you can write it down and then check yourself later. And I even do this to this day. When I come up against something that I really get scared about, I write it down just to say, and I journal every single day. So I always put it in my journal. I'm really afraid to do this or that. And then I see what the outcome is. And 99.9% of the time, the outcome is, I was falsely worrying or fearing. So again, I think strategies help us get through life. And so keeping that little acronym close by to check out, is this false evidence appearing as real? Another strategy that I think can be really powerful is the how to, want to, chance to. So whenever let's just say you're thinking, I'm really terrified about what if I miss my connection? What if I miss something? Or what if I don't know how to navigate the airport? And so this strategy, do I know how to do it? You may actually know how, or could you be able to if you don't know how to do it, could you ask someone? So that falls under the how to. The want to, sometimes we get excited about something and we decide to move forward, then all of a sudden we're feeling all these concerns, and then asking yourself the question, do I really want to do this? Because sometimes you really don't, and that's okay too, but it's really, rather than just pushing back and stewing in your fears or your concern, ask yourself, do I really want to do this? So how to, want to, and then chance to, because sometimes we create a bunch of fears when we really don't have a chance to do something. But that's just one strategy that you can employ when you're noticing any of these things that are fearful. And the last strategy I want to share with you really quickly in the time that we have is that notion of enlisting a trusted friend, a spouse, a partner, and just asking them to strategize with you, or just ask them to listen. So, Doni was talking about this beautiful list of questions, that you have around your fears. And so finding someone that you trust, someone that has your best interests at heart, who you could ask, here's what I'm thinking. I mean, am I on the right track with this? Or is this just something that I've kind of made up because our ego is trying to really keep us safe. Our ego is trying to keep us in the familiar. And with that, I want to just tell you a very quick travel story. And that is, many years ago, my first solo trip was to Antarctica. And this was a very big deal. I had a lot of pushback. People were like, why would you go there? Why, it's cold, it's this, it's that. Why would you go alone? So I really didn't. There was a lot of people trying to Shanghai my dream of going to Antarctica. Well, they didn't have to do it because there was a giant oil spill. And I was going with the Smithsonian because I was trying to keep myself really safe. And I decided, the Smithsonian, if you're going to take a trip with the Smithsonian and you're going solo, how bad can that be? Well, guess what? There's an oil spill in the Smithsonian, canceled the trip. But I got a message from my travel agent who said, the Chilean government is organizing the trip with all the people that wanted to go to Antarctica but can, and they can only take 50 people. Do you want to be part of that? And I'm like, well, who's the Chilean government? Isn't it Pinochet who just shot up a bunch of buildings? I was really, really afraid, but I really wanted to go to Antarctica. And so I want to tell you, I just worked through every single fear and had a checklist. I had a safe friend that I could call. I was worried, would I get kidnapped? But the long story short is I went on the trip to Antarctica. It was a trip that changed my life. And I have never, ever looked back at solo travel. I'm so glad that at age, whatever I was probably about 34 or 5, my first solo trip. And from then on, I felt really safe and comfortable to travel the world. So really, back to you, Doni.
Oh, thank you. That's a great story. And I love those strategies too. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to a very good friend. Mary Beth Metelski is one of those incredible people who went back to school, and now she's on her maybe second or third career. She's for many decades now has been a licensed clinical social worker. So she's a therapist, and it helps people deal with their fears. And of course, she's getting a lot of work these days. So she's going to help us with 5 strategies around how to tame or deal with, face our fears, and how to understand the difference between something that you should be afraid of, like I'm not going to walk into that burning building, or something that maybe is not as rational. So where is she?
I'm right here, Doni.
There she is. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be with this really incredible group of women. And lovely to hear what you had to say, Debbie. And I'm hoping to be able to maybe help everyone manage their anxiety more effectively. But before we do that, I would really like to just talk about our brain, because we have some very old brains. The back of the brain, where our fight or flight or threat detection system lives, 500 million years old. It's a dinosaur brain. And it was designed to be very hypersensitive to threats. So you notice the way we jump when you see a spider or a stink bug, and you get flooded with energy that was meant to help us fight our way out of a battle or climb a tree to get away from a lion. It's not really the most useful amount of energy to deal with a stink bug. So we need to figure out how to manage that excess energy. The front of the brain, where we think, that's only 200 million years old. But can you imagine if our computers were this old? We are using such outdated equipment for the world that we live in now. So have you ever been caught in worry loops that just seem endlessly, sort of like those loops when a program won't load on your computer? So what I'm really hoping is that we can have an update to the system. So there are two big problems with our outdated system. One is we are not draining the overcharge of energy, which overstimulates our worry and tends toward a catastrophe, catastrophic thinking. And then it just becomes an endless loop. So we need to use that physical exercise energy productively to feel good. We need to exercise. Some people love to clean. I think yoga is the best thing out there. Anything that helps us to move from thinking into the flow of doing. So second problem is that the front of the brain was never really fully wired into the back of the brain, doesn't really communicate very well. We can tell ourselves to stop worrying. How well does that work? Or someone tells us to relax, not helpful. The words don't impact, that the back of the brain is more visual. It's not really tuned to language. So although I do have a client that says, she says to herself, drop it, the same way she talks to her dog, and often that works for her. But what we really need to do is get good at and learn to use the language that the back of the brain understands, which is the language of the body. We have two main tools, our breath and our sensory equipment. So what I would love to do is just some soft belly breathing, because often when I'm trying to work with people around breath, I see them, their chest going up and down. And that's the kind of breath that is associated with alarm and panic. So we want to, if everyone really wants to join in, put your hands on your belly. We want our bellies to feel nice and soft. And I think a soft belly is a nice belly. And let's just breathe into that belly so we move our hands. And then we want to exhale very nice and slow. We're really trying to let the steam out of the engine. So let's just two more belly breaths. Feeling your hands moving, noticing how your ribs expand. It's really like we're trying to give our mind a massage with our breath. So I'm hoping that that feels good to people. But of course, for some of us, just focusing on the breath is not enough for our very, very busy minds. So let's do another couple of breaths where we do some counting. Let's breathe in for a count of 5, hold for a count of 6, breathe out for 7. So we're going to breathe in 2, 3, 4, 5, hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 2 more times. In, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. One more. 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, what's really key about these tools is practice. We really, if we want a strong response, we've got to practice it a lot, just like learning anything, and especially practice it when we're already relaxed, not wait till we're panicking to try and breathe. So if we want to even strengthen the response from there, it's good to bring another sense in. So let's add some imagery. Why don't we pretend we're at a beautiful table in Naples and someone has just served us a delicious pizza. So we're going to take a beautiful deep breath. We're going to smell that deliciousness. And then, oh, look at all that hot, beautiful olive oil. We're going to blow. So anything that helps us to strengthen our sensory experience really makes a difference. And we could use other imagery. It could be a beautiful birthday cake with many, many candles that we probably are getting to now. We can breathe in again the deliciousness and then blow out all the candles. Or we could use something very simple, just a curtain. As we breathe in, it comes into the room. And as we breathe out, it flows out the window. So really allowing ourselves to amplify our commitment to the breath with a visual. And now let's try to use another tactile sense. We are going to use an anxiety thermometer. So I want you to imagine a giant old thermometer, you know, with the big red ball at the bottom, 0 to 100, because I'm still a Fahrenheit girl. And then I want you, 0 is total chill. 100 is the most anxious you've ever been. So I want you to kind of scan yourself. Hopefully right now you're feeling pretty calm because we've done some breathing. But let's imagine if you scanned yourself at a more stressful time, you might be at your temperature might be at 70. So let's breathe in and then watch the thermometer as we exhale drop to 60. Breathe in. Watch the thermometer drop to 50. Oh, getting a little chilly. Breathe in. Watch the thermometer drop to 40. Breathe in. Watch the thermometer drop to 30. Wow, things are freezing. Breathe in. Watch the thermometer drop to 20. Breathe in. Watch the thermometer drop to 10. Breathe in. Watch the thermometer drop to 0. You have arrived at total chill. So taking a moment to sort of notice what all that felt like, tuning into our bodies. We could also do a similar visualization, maybe with an elevator, so that you see yourself pressing the button and you breathe in as the doors open. You breathe out as the doors close and the elevator descends a floor. And you keep going down till you get to the ground floor, because it's very grounding to imagine something coming down. And with the thermometer, we're imagining a little chill, because often when we're anxious, we're kind of hot and flustered and up here. So thinking of the ground, thinking of trees and their roots in the ground, really using that sensation of grounding. And now the last tool we're going to talk about is just a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 using our senses. Because the thing about worrying, as we've all mentioned here actually, is that when we worry, we tend to time travel. Part of the reason we get stuck in those endless worry loops is that we're trying to solve somewhat imaginary problems that are in the future, and they're unclear and indistinct and thus unsolvable because we really don't have the details needed. I have always loved the line, I have suffered thousands and thousands of misfortunes in my life, most of which never happened. So let's try to let go of that. The great thing about our senses, it brings us back to our body, and our body always knows where it is. So looking around, everyone take a moment to notice 5 visual things, 5 things you can see in the environment you're in, and just labeling them to yourself. Now we're going to shift to our hearing, to our physical sensations. We're going to notice 4 physical sensations inside our body or on the surface of our skin. So taking a moment to come into the body, noticing 4 physical experiences. Maybe it's your seat on the chair, your feet on the floor. And then, so 5 visuals, 4 physical sensations, and how about 3 sounds? Let's take a moment to listen, use our sensation of hearing to identify 3 things we can hear. Sometimes this is challenging because we're in very quiet environments. Thank you, Tina, who left, made a sound for us. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2 scents, 2 smells. And sometimes you can just try to be aware of the scent of the room we're in, where we can cheat a little bit if we happen to have a little essential oil nearby, maybe a little lavender. We can smell beautiful essential oil or some perfume or lotion or a candle. Sometimes when I'm really panicking, I will go over to the spice rack and I'll just open all the spices and smell them. Jolts you out of what you're thinking about. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2. Last one is taste. Just noticing the taste in our mouth or our lips, or possibly using a mint or something. But those 5 senses really circle us back into the present moment, right now, which is also known as reality, and often in the present moment, 0 problems. So I just have one more quick thing to join into this, which is that we don't all go into fight or flight when we're anxious. Many of us go into freeze. We tighten up, we contract, we want to curl into a ball, hide under the bed, pull the blankets over our heads. That's when anxiety brings us into a depressed response, in which case we want to stimulate the system back up. We've been pulling it down, so now let's pull the energy back up. We're going to make 2 quick inhalations and a short exhalation. We'll do it 3 times. So we're just going to go. And I think you can kind of feel, I hope, how that starts to raise the energy again. So now, of course, we're all still going to get anxious, but I'm hoping you have a few more tools in your tool chest. And I'm really hoping that everyone is going to make a commitment to stop showing yourself scary movies about the future, because you're not getting paid for writing them, and see yourself at the ticket window, rip up the ticket and drop it. That's all I got.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I knew there was a really good reason I invited you on this call. Wow.
My pleasure.
That was just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And it is, it's all about getting back into the here and now and the body. But I love those techniques. And we're going to be sharing this with you on email tomorrow. So, you can scroll ahead and bookmark this, write it down, and practice this, because This is going to help all of us at any time, any place, anywhere, on the plane, in the bed when you can't sleep, in the middle of the night when you wake up worrying about something that the next morning you can't even understand why you were worried about it. So we're going to quickly now move along to our other 3 amazing rock star experts that are on the phone on the webinar. And so delighted to introduce Janet Waugh. She is the founder of Solo Traveler World. And I will email you guys so you have everybody's contact information in terms of their website, etc. But it's Solo Traveler World. It's a community of women where people can share their passion for traveling alone. So she had a love of travel and some personal loss and emptiness that inspired her to start a Solo Traveler in 2009, which is curious. That's when I started my website too. She has been called the doyenne of solo travel, excuse me. I met her a few years ago at a travel tech conference, and she's as warm and wonderful as she is savvy. So many of your questions that I'm going to do a rapid fire with these ladies, all 3 of them, you can be answered, excuse me, by going to Solo Traveler World, because she and as well as JourneyWoman, they do all kinds of tips and just really important stuff. Kelly Lewis, she's the younger, maybe sexier version of myself. I wish I was as cool as she. She founded, and go, by the way, if you want to know more about her, her website is gokellylewis.com. She just wrote a book. She's an author, she's an entrepreneur, she's a traveler, and she started a lot of travel companies. So she's a serial entrepreneur. She started Go Girl Guides. I'm sure you guys have heard of those. If you've not, look it up. The Women's Travel Fest, which is where I met her, and it's an amazing travel conference for women only, and Romery, which I don't know much about. Maybe she'll tell us about that, and Damesly, and they do really cool tours all over the world. She's been called the women's travel guru, named top 10 women in travel to watch. She's called also the woman who's changing the face of travel. But she, like the rest of us, really her main mission is to help women connect, find their personal power through traveling the world. And that's kind of what we're all here all about. And the fear is what stops us from doing that. So that's why it all's connected here. I met her several years ago at her event, and stay tuned till the end of this, because she and I are going to give away some really good deals. So Carolyn, our 3rd rock star, and looking very glamorous tonight, hailing from Canada tonight, and actually 2 of these ladies are from Canada, Janice as well. She runs the oldest and longest women's only travel publication in existence, dating back to 1994, pre-internet. Yes, there was a time before the internet. So Evelyn Hannon is actually the founder, and unfortunately passed away, and Carolyn took over. She's a media branding expert, and she's been doing amazing things with this website. She does such cool events. She empowers women. She talks to them about safety. She's got tons of webinars that she's done. Amazing. I mean, I've met so many cool people through her, and I'm very lucky to be on her advisory board with a lot of other amazing women. She also, what I love about JourneyWoman is they really empower older women to just stay out there and, you know, conquer our fears and keep on going. So I am going to just quickly go through all of these questions that you guys have and just throw them out to these experts. Kind of consider this like a panel, but it's going to be a little bit rapid fire. I'm going to start with Janice. Can you give us, first of all, one moment where you were afraid personally? You know, we know you're a bold traveler, but you were afraid personally in a travel situation, and how you dealt with it.
Okay, I really had to think about this. I guess the most fearful I was actually on the Navimag ferry in Chile when it crashed. But it's not a very representative, it turned out fine. Obviously I'm here, but it's not very representative of something that could be helpful. So I think what could be helpful is when I think about, I was on a train trip from Chicago to New Orleans, and I was going into every blues bar I could. That was my journey.
But when I arrived in Memphis, it was an overnight train from Chicago to Memphis. I did not get the wake-up call, or else I didn't hear the knock at the door. I woke up, we were in the station. I had to just grab my stuff and go. And I got out of the train, and a taxi driver came to me right away and said, "I'll take you where you want to go." And I wasn't ready for that. So to deal with it, I said, hold on, I just have to go to the station for a minute. I went into the station, sat down, and I looked, saw the car he went to, saw that it had a number, thought, okay, this is safe. And then I went out, and he ended up driving me a number of times that day because he gave me the card. So over my visit to Memphis. So that's kind of a strategy to deal with difficult or fearful situations, is slow down, look around. Where are the resources that you need? Is this really a real danger or not?
Yeah,
Right?
that's great.
That
That's really great. That's perfect. So now after Janice, I want to go to Kelly. So you're, I'd say in the millennial generation, I'm not sure, I get all those confused, but a lot of us who might be a little bit older than you believe that you guys are more bold and more fearless. And is that true?
No, I think it's a total misconception. I do not think that's true. And it's funny because like the way that other people perceive others is like a reflection of ourselves, right? So I know you were saying that you see me as this very bold person, and I don't honestly often see myself that way, but then I'll take a step back and I'm like, wait a minute, I've done so many crazy cool things. Like I've sailed around the world, I've jumped from the highest bungee. And I think the key is that I'm good at just making myself do it. And then once done, then that becomes the barometer for what I can do and what
Yeah.
I am capable of. And so that's why I think travel is so important to me, is like it really reminds me of my own personal strength and capability. And I bring that back to my regular life. So, when I'm having a tough day, I'll think like, girl, you got this. Like you could totally do this. You hiked Machu Picchu. Like you sailed to Antarctica. You could do this. And so that's what I think is the best thing about travel, is like you can use it as a barometer by pushing yourself. And maybe it's getting out on that first trip that's really intimidating, or maybe it's sailing across the Atlantic, which is terrifying. But whatever it is, once you've done it, it's no longer scary, and then it makes everything else less scary and turns everything into an adventure. And so that's what I think.
So that's perfect. I always used to say after having kids, I've had a kid, so I can do anything, man. That was hard. So Carolyn, tell us about how travel and conquering a particular fear has empowered you. Two-part question. I also want you to share with us. You had a big survey talking about what women's fears were and travel fears around safety. So I just want to, if you can share both of those with us, I'd really appreciate it.
Yeah. And Doni, thank you so much for having me, and to be on this panel with all these amazing women is just amazing. And I see a lot of JourneyWoman's faces here. So thank you also for coming to support this. So I grew up in a little town in Florida, and I didn't really travel much until I was done high school, and I went to Europe, and it really blew my mind. But then I went to Canada for university after that, and I got married and had a little girl. And when I was in my 30s, I got divorced, which was pretty traumatizing because I had always envisioned this somewhat perfect life for myself, and that didn't work out. And he wasn't much of a traveler, and I hadn't been much of a traveler when I was young. And so when you go through a massive change like this, what I did was I made a list of all the things that absolutely terrified me. And at the top of that list was raising a little girl by myself. That was number one. But also travel was another one. Just being by myself at all was a really scary moment for me. So I made this list and I decided, I was a little messed up, but I quit my job. I got rid of, I cashed in my savings, and I took my daughter and I to Europe, and we went there for about 5 weeks and just hung out together. And And then I came home and I did all the other things that I was afraid of, like getting a motorcycle license. And I had a list of about 50 things. Like it was quite a long list. But for the first time in my life, I really felt empowered. Like I could actually do something, and I could do it by myself, and I could do it on my own. And then that kicked off decades of travel and, going all over the world with work, which was amazing. And of course, I bring my daughter with me everywhere now. So she's 20 and she's quite a good little traveler. But when I turned 50, I had another moment, which was where I went to Kenya on a service trip. And I came home and I looked at everything that I had. And I said, what am I doing acquiring all these, material possessions? What is this all about? And I just wanted to be free of it. So I got rid of everything I owned in about 6 weeks. And decided that I wanted to just have whatever I could fit in my backpack. That was all I was going to own. And I felt free for the first time ever in my life. And so my advice is sometimes you just have to, I know I'm talking about big things here, but it all started with one thing. And it started with taking one step at a time. And so that would be my advice, is just do one thing. For me, it was making a list. I tend to make decisions quickly and then I just figure out how to do them later. But that's my advice, is take the first step and don't worry about how little or big it is. Just move forward in some way.
Wow, that's inspiring right there. So we just have 10 minutes left. I'm going to keep going and get as many of these questions answered. And if you have something that you feel that we're just really not getting to, and just show it, just grab it, just throw something in the chat. So I have 3 categories of things. I kind of compiled like 300 different comments into 3 categories. So there are fears, general fears and concerns. There are COVID surrounding fears, and then more practical concerns. So I'm going to start with the heavy duty fears. And I just want to give you a real snippet of some of the heartfelt things that people wrote. Here's one. Here's an example of one of the comments. The question was, one fear that stops you. And this lady said, getting a horrible disease. 20 years ago, I canceled my dream work trip to the UK because I became so worried about this. It was a worry that she might get it, but she didn't, and unfortunately didn't get to go on that trip. Another lady said, how do I make that leap of faith that everything will be all right? So another lady said, how do we recover the feeling of freedom in travel after COVID? I traveled alone, but heading to a destination where friends and family were waiting. All of this is causing anxiety. I was ready to go, and then the world shut down. Another lady said, just wondering how many people in my age group are just going on a woman's travel trip, a group trip for the first time, especially to foreign countries, and what protections are in place, in the event of a medical emergency. That came up a lot. Traveling alone for the first time at age 66 is daunting. So, we have so many different concerns. The one that really got me is a lady who just wrote on an email separately, said, how do I get back out there? And I'm going to put this one to you, Debbie. After my husband has died, how do I travel alone without him? And she said it even brought her to tears to write that. Debbie, this has happened to you. How did you do it?
Right. It did happen to me. And what I did was make one trip in the United States overnight, one night. I stayed at this gorgeous bed and breakfast that had this gigantic canopy bed. So it was very feminine. And I will never forget the next morning when I got in, the room had a fireplace in it. It was just so perfect. And I remember the next morning I got up and I was like, yes, I can do this. And so I would just urge the person who wrote that is to start really small, just what feels right for, maybe an overnight. And if that feels like too much, maybe you just go away for a day and have a day to yourself, but start small.
That's great. Just a practice run.
Another
Another question, Debbie. Another lady asked, I'm feeling guilty about taking time off from work or family just for myself. How do I enjoy myself when I feel so guilty?
Right. So guilt is a standard that we set for ourselves. And again, it's kind of an imaginary standard. So I would just ask her why she feels guilty. And what if she had a colleague who had worked hard, as we presumably, as I'm sure she has, would she resent it if a colleague went on vacation? Usually the answer to that is no. And again, guilt, the therapist here would know, guilt stems from all kinds of different things. But one little quickie way I always just ask people is, would you allow somebody else to do that? And most often the answer is yes.
Yeah,
It's
that's a good one.
with it.
Mary Beth, on a group tour, I have issues with other people. That's why I like to go alone, this lady says. So what about that worry that either there's a lot of worry around, if I'm going alone on solo travel, I'm going to try and do a trip alone. I'm going to be by myself at night. That scares me. Or what if I don't like the other people? Just sort of these interpersonal relationship concerns.
Well, I think a lot of those concerns are really about either fears of being alone or the need for alone time. And I think part of what we can look for in that is how to possibly, if we need alone time, is there a way to give it? Can we use headphones or a book or take a little time from a roommate or a group that's bothering us? What's so important is to feel that we have some control. And if being alone in a room, traveling alone is difficult, I know a lot of my millennial clients, they often go to sleep FaceTiming with a relative or friend that might be back home. Or I know a lot of people who really find very calming to have an audiobook of some kind. Again, actually from my millennials, they listen to Harry Potter, I don't know how many times. They go to sleep to that book over and over again. So I think understanding what your needs are, understanding your comfort, self-soothing things, and recognizing not everyone's going to like us, and that's okay too.
That's
Find the one person that does, that you feel drawn to.
Wonderful. Another important question, and also Carolyn, I think you should address this. The fear of being harassed or physically attacked, safety, the real big, am I going to be safe in XYZ country or by myself or on this group, or, just generalized safety concerns.
Sure. Well, the survey that we just did showed that more than 88% of women have felt threatened or unsafe when they're traveling. And 97% didn't feel they had the self-defense, physical kind of skills they needed to defend themselves. So I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge. There are a lot of tips that we can talk about to help women stay safe. But I actually think after having gone through self-defense training, that would be my recommendation for women, to learn how to use your voice, to learn how to use your body, because regardless of your physical state, we all have a voice, and there are things that we can do to look after ourselves. But yeah, and safety, I don't think is necessarily destination specific. So when I see lists of safest countries and things like that, I kind of go, I think it's really a mindset and having a plan and being ready for whatever comes your way.
Yeah, and go to JourneyWoman, they do a lot around this. Janice, these are two questions. Fear of spending the night in a strange place alone. So that kind of goes back to that fear of alone, but also fear of being taken advantage of. Now, this is not the safety as much, but just I'm a solo woman traveling and somebody going to rip me off or just, lead me down the wrong path kind of thing. What would you say to that?
I think that's something that's the confidence piece, right? And to be confident as you travel is really important. One of the things that I've found numerous times in talking to people is that once they go and travel solo, especially, they discover that they were not who they thought they were. Right?
Mm.
They learn how much they've grown over the years, and therefore they're more confident than they thought. But you still have to start the trip. So, one of the things that I do suggest is like just go cold turkey on the crime shows for a bit before you travel, right? Like let's not get all of that drama in our heads. Do a bit of research. Obviously, we all do some research before we travel, but also use a map to research so you know which way is up, right? If you're in New York and you know where you're standing and the park is north of you, that's a very helpful piece of information, right? If you're in Toronto, you look for the tower, it's by the lake, it's south, right? To know these things is very helpful. But also, and I think I think Debbie raised it, is find your cheerleader. Find the person that you can talk with that will be supportive of your desire to travel solo. I think that's a really, really important piece. And then you can talk to them as you plan your trip. You can communicate with them as you're on your trip. And that piece of planning for communication is also important because that will add a layer of confidence. And finally, be patient with yourself, right? Take it easy on yourself. It's not always going to be easy. That blank canvas of what you're walking into can be a little bit tricky, but if you're calm, if you use the breathing techniques that Mary Beth is suggesting, right, it'll bring you down and build your confidence up.
That's wonderful. Kelly, a lot of questions around what if I get sick? What's the healthcare like? Health concerns.
Yeah, I mean, you might get sick. Like you might get sick. Bad things might happen. And this is the thing, is like whatever comes your way, you can figure out, like without a doubt. I know that without a doubt. And what I want to reiterate in this conversation is that if travel has taught me one thing, it is that the world is mostly safe and people are mostly good. So you might find yourself in a situation where you feel unsafe or uncomfortable. Strangers will come to your rescue, like the taxi that showed up for Janice just out of the blue. People, like the universe will send you help when you need it. And so you can't let your fear of what might happen hold you back from exploring a world full of love and possibility and friendship and adventure. And so you might get sick. I've been sick so many times. I've gotten dysentery. I've been horribly, horribly sick, but I'm still standing. I've been assaulted in Argentina. I've been assaulted in New York City. I'm still standing. And so traveling doesn't need to be something that we are so afraid to do, because what it does is it reminds us how strong we are and how much support we have.
Amen. Amen. That was beautiful. That's basically everything in a nutshell right there.
Can I add one thing to that, please?
Please, Janice.
In China, I fell and hurt my arm very badly. And as a result, I went through the Chinese healthcare system. That was an adventure.
Yeah.
That was very cool. It's such a great experience. So I just, it's not all bad, even if something bad happens.
That's so true. I a lot of people say, what if I get lost in the airport? What if I miss a plane? What if I lose the luggage? Every single thing has happened to me, of course, as I'm sure it's happened to all of you guys. It's not that bad. Worst case scenario, they deliver the luggage the next day. Worst case scenario is you never get it back and you'll have to buy some new clothes. This is not life or death. So I think we have to scale those concerns. Now I'm just going to go quickly through because we're at 9 and I'll maybe just go a couple of minutes late because I don't want to keep you guys. But on the COVID worries and that wonderfully, that actually wasn't the bulk of people's concerns. But how will travel be different? Is air travel safe now? Carolyn, do you want to answer this is a question I've gotten. Not only is it safe to travel on an airline, I'm afraid of traveling on air in general. Is it safe to travel now? And I'm worried about wearing a mask for 5 and 6 hours.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm the expert on those things, but I think, the rule of thumb is follow CDC guidance, make sure you're following local health regulations. I actually just launched a COVID resource center yesterday on our website and did a lot of research to figure this out. It's super complicated. Well, those things aren't complicated, but when you get into different countries regarding health regulations and things like that, it can be different. So, so do your planning.
And and all of these things can be answered. Everybody asked me, can we travel to Europe? Yes, as of June 9th, we can go to France. Everything's still, it's literally changing every day. But
look at vaccine passports, Doni. That's going to be a whole new thing for us to figure out, and that is completely unknown. So
exactly. So but the point is, we're at this moment where travel is opening up. Talk to an advisor, a travel advisor, whether it's a travel agent, do your own research, go on JourneyWoman or Solo Travel World, or, look at all the amazing things that Kelly has to offer as well on Damesly. And you did a COVID, actually, can you talk to us about the vaccine passports? You did a whole webinar on that.
Yeah, we did. It was wonderful. The thing about vaccine passports is there's so many things that we don't know yet. And because each passport is privatized, it's not public or across the board, everything's changing. So, it would be awesome if we could just have one app that we had to download that would be good for all of the different airlines. But a lot remains to be seen, in how that's going to work.
Yeah. Well, and people are working on it right this minute. So this is going to be answered. I will talk to you from a place where I actually traveled a lot during COVID because we were in New York at the epicenter. I felt like any place that's not New York would be safer. So we were in Mexico for 2 months. We were in Honduras for 2 months. We were in California before. So I have navigated this pre-vaccine. Now I'm vaccinated. I'm feeling much better about it. But what I liked that the CDC said the other day, which people from Canada, that's our, national healthcare recommendation organization, if you will. They said, and the director of the CDC, and I know some of this gets into political stuff, but I got to listen to these experts because I'm not one. But she said, if you are vaccinated and you are working right next to somebody who is not vaccinated and maybe has COVID and is not wearing a mask and you're not wearing a mask, you are okay, because that's the point of the vaccine. So there's 95% chance you're covered. If you do get it, in the 5% chance that you will either have no symptoms or have a very light, touch of the disease. So, that's the best they can do. I think it's kind of a miracle that they did this. There's people who are asking about the variants. So right now, the vaccines that we have out there have been doing really well on the variants, but all of this is changing. So I am not letting it stop me. I'm going to Greece in a few weeks. I'm doing a trip with Debbie to Paris and the Loire. Feel free to reach out to any one of us and ask us, advice on this. And then there's 100 other, great locations to find advice on. So I just want to thank, everybody. There's so many more questions, but I just couldn't get to all of them. We could probably do this for 3 hours, but it's late at night, and I'm sure a lot of you guys want to eat dinner or, watch that Netflix show, and don't watch the SVU if you happen to be traveling. I'm going to send out a follow-up email. I want to let everyone know that Kelly has said you can get $50 off if you sign up for up between now and June 1st for her travel. I'm just blanking. What's it called?
Women's Travel Fest.
Thank you.
Yep.
Little senior moment there. Women's Travel Fest. And I will send that link out too. And I will give you a code for that. And then I'm offering $300 off any 2021 trips that are a new booking for you. So I'll send information on that. And just thank you to everyone for joining, for these amazing ladies, experts, and just brilliant women. There's so much knowledge out there in the community of women. I'm just grateful that this is what I get to do for a living. It's such a gift to be able to hang out with rock star ladies like you, and to just, get to do this. It's amazing. It's a lot more fun than when I used to be in politics, let me tell you that. So Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Kelly, Janice, and Mary Beth. Brilliant. Brilliant recommendations and just amazing night. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doni. You're incredible. What a host. Hostess with the mostest.
Thanks, Doni. That was really great.
Brilliant
Thank you,
idea.
guys.
Let's hear
Have a great night and hopefully conquer a fear tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everyone. It was just